Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Enterprise Connect webinar, Contact Center AI Fireside Chat, sponsored by Google and broadcast by Informa. I'm Eric Kraft with Enterprise Connect, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive. The dock of widgets at the bottom of your screen will allow you to learn about today's speakers, download resources, share this webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that takes place at the end of our presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you may also download a copy of the slides via the Resources widget. Toward the end of our webinar, we'll ask you to complete our survey, which is found on the right-hand side of your screen. Please take a minute to fill this out before leaving us today, as your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. Lastly, if you are experiencing any technical problems, please click the Help widget found at the bottom of your screen, or type your issue into the Q&A area, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Now on to the presentation. Contact Center AI Fireside Chat. Discussing today's topic is Sheila McGee-Smith, founder of McGee-Smith Analytics, Matt Jones, product manager at Google, and Celeste Grade, Alliance Relationship Manager at Google. Sheila, Matt, Celeste, over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome, everyone. So if you are regular readers of No Jitter, you may have noticed within the last week or so, I wrote a post called, "Are You Ready? Google Contact Center AI is here." And we are very lucky today to have two of the people who have helped bring us to this point in time, Celeste and Matt. And I have created some questions that I know that if you were here and you had an opportunity to be with them in front of a fireside, you might want to ask. So the first one, Matt, is why is artificial intelligence so hot right now? I mean, we think about it for the last, AI started 50 years ago. I mean, singularity theory, was something that came up in the 1950s. Some of the logical reasons why AI now is there's so much greater computing power, there's so much more data available to support machine learning. Certainly cloud computing, I think, has been such a big part of it. But what is your perspective on why artificial intelligence is so hot right now, Matt?
Thanks, Sheila. I think that's a really good question to ask. So I think you hit on a couple of the key points there. There's aspects of on the data side, aspects on the hardware side, as well as on the software side. And so at Google, we've kind of noticed significant advances in technology, both on hardware, where we have developed what are called TensorFlow processing units, or TPUs, which are specific hardware to take advantage of the vast amounts of data that's not readily available for kind of AI, as well as we've invested in developing algorithms that can take advantage of that hardware so that we can really make this vision of AI that, as you said, has been around for decades, we can make it into a reality. Now, when we think about contact centers specifically, there's a unique opportunity to take advantage of this. Historically, brands have tried to identify ways to reduce the cost to serve customers while simultaneously trying to improve customer experience. Now, unfortunately, this has led to automation experiences such as IVR trees that I think most of us can agree don't feel super customer-centric, right? And so we're all too familiar with the experience of having to listen to all the choices of an IVR multiple times in order to make a proper selection, only to then be forced to do it all over again and keep going deeper and deeper through this IVR tree. And we see it as in many ways, our attempt to modernize and improve the customer service experience actually ended up in shifting part of the burden from the contact center to the customer. And so artificial intelligence is relevant for contact centers now because the technology is at a place where we can really remove that burden from our customers and incorporate technologies that actually deliver on this goal of improved customer service as well as increased operational efficiency. Now, conversational AI specifically, which is technologies that relate to conversational experiences, are allowing us to create systems that can understand what users are contacting us about and let them speak to us in a way that's natural and simple and kind of feels like a human-like conversation. And so we're seeing use cases. For instance, one of our customers, Marks & Spencer, has migrated to a truly conversational IVR, where customers call in and they just say naturally how they typically would, what their problem is, and what they're looking for. And they've been able to scale that in a way that previously wasn't possible. They're handling over 6 million calls routed, and that conversational IVR can handle over 2,000 customer intents. Now, if you think about in the context of having a human routing that call, that's a lot for a human to manage, right? To really accurately route 2,000 different types of requests. And so we're seeing that now is really the time for artificial intelligence to have an impact in the contact center space.
Excellent. Yeah, it's interesting to think about having been in the market as IVR first came in, right, in the early 90s. Originally, what we wanted from IVRs was the ability to automate some portion of calls, right? Maybe it was 5%, maybe it was 10%, things that could be very easily answered. And when I think about conversational AI, I think about what, again, we don't want to get rid of all live agents, right? What we want to do is perhaps take that 5 or 10% that the 1990s IVR was able to automate and perhaps lift that a little higher, and to your point, take on some of that burden that the customers have had to explain everything and let artificial intelligence maybe get us to 20, 25% of the kinds of interactions and questions that customers have being automated, and then so much easier for customers. So let's move on.
Exactly.
What is Google Contact Center AI? What does that mean?
Good question. So Google Contact Center AI is a solution that brings together a couple of different conversational AI building blocks to create a product specifically tailored to serve the needs of the contact center. So the first building block we think of is cloud speech. So there are a couple of components to cloud speech itself. The first is speech-to-text transcription, which provides the ability to take audio and identify specifically what words the user is actually saying. The other side of that is text-to-speech, which provides the ability to take the text and then turn it into an audio signal, and it's actually a voice response saying those words. The other building block we think about is dialogue flow. And dialogue flow is effectively the core natural language understanding piece here. This is what allows us to go from just a sentence or words to actually meaning, to understand what is this user or customer trying to convey to us, what is their intent. Now, we've taken these building blocks and then we've added some very contact center specific functionality, as well as partnered with telephony providers to package this into what we call the Contact Center AI solution. Now, that solution is made up of 3 key components. So the first is virtual agent, which is effectively voice bots, chat bots. You can think of conversational IVR experiences, all of which are powered by dialogue flow. The second is agent assist, which provides real-time suggestions to customer service agents based on what the customer is saying. And this is where we think about what you discussed before is we want to have the virtual agent can handle hopefully 25 or more % of the simple calls and then empower the agents to be specialists so that they can handle the tough calls and the more interesting use cases. And then the third component is insights. And this is where we enable contact center managers and quality assurance analysts to better understand what's happening in the contact center in real time.
So one of the words that you've used a few times is intent. And we talked about Marks & Spencer creating a conversational interface that can handle 2,000 intents. Can you give the audience a couple examples of what an intent might be, just so people can understand it?
Yeah, definitely. So an intent at the end of the day is just what is the user trying to say to us, trying to understand what they want to do. So, for example, if you're Marks & Spencer, then an intent might be, I want to understand what hours a certain store is open, right? Or if you're a telecom provider, it might be, I want to understand what are the international travel plan options. It's really, at the end of the day, what is this user calling about? And so as a contact center manager, you could understand that your users have hundreds of different reasons that they might call in. And that means you could have hundreds or even thousands of different intents. And that's what is at the core of this natural language understanding technology, is the ability to effectively understand what is this user reaching out to us about and let them talk to us in a natural and kind of human-friendly way.
Okay, now I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Are there types of intents that don't lend themselves to conversational AI? That when you see them, you say, okay, that's really going to have to be a human agent?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Sheila. And I think the way to think about this is, what are those types of intents that you want to have a human touch, right? So if, for instance, maybe you're working with a bank provider and someone lost their credit card and they've identified that there have been some fraudulent charges, that customer wants to have a human in the loop to feel like that their concerns are being met, as well as to feel a sense of confidence that their account is being managed properly. There are also other instances where maybe it's a truly, truly complicated and unique instance. You rarely want to build the intents to handle every specific type of intent that might come out there. You want to get the intents that can get the most coverage, right? And then at a certain point, you can start to lose a little bit of their ROI if you get the intent that'll only show up once a year, right? So the way I think about it is there's kind of two ways to think about it. You, want to make sure if there should be a human in the loop, that the customer knows that you care about them and you're bringing in your agent to handle their case specifically. And then on the other side is, if it doesn't happen very often, then it might not be worth the effort of building out an intent for it.
Excellent. That really helps us understand, how this applies to our businesses. So let's move on. What does Google see as its role in bringing AI to the contact center? Because, for example, you're not a contact center provider. You're not saying you have a contact center software solution. So what is your role? What is Google's role here?
So to your point, we are not a contact center provider, but we have been investing significantly in conversational AI technologies for the past few years. And I think this kind of makes sense, right? If you think about the development that we've needed to build to make Google Search and Google Assistant as effective as it is currently, we had to had to invest in both the algorithm side as well as the scaling side to make those consumer products be able to integrate conversational AI at scale and do it well. And the reality is that conversational AI it's very relevant to the contact center. So we see this as our opportunity to improve consumer experiences for all brands. In many ways, it's an opportunity to democratize better customer experience. And ultimately, we hope that brands spend less time worrying about how can they technically bring these experiences to customers, and more so spend time thinking about, how do I create an experience that's true to my brand and allows me to develop a deeper relationship with my customer. We like to think that we can create the best conversational AI technology, but our customers understand their voice and their brand, and those are the things that they should be focusing on within the contact center.
So are you going to walk through these elements? You've touched on virtual agent and agent assist and insights, but could you talk a little bit more perhaps about how I, as a company, might install, how I might implement Google Contact Center AI? Do I have to do all of these things? Can I do one of these things? How would that work?
Great question, and thanks for that, Sheila. So as I mentioned before, there are kind of these three components to Contact Center AI. There's the virtual agent, which is the voice bot, the chat bot, agent assist, which is how we actually help the human agent while they're with the customer, as well as insights, which gives more information to your customer service managers and their quality assurance analysts. Now, when we think about where to start, there are a couple of places. The easiest place frequently is on the virtual agent side. you'll have an understanding of what our customers calling about, and so you could build out a conversational experience to start to offload some of the burden of the mundane questions from your agents. And secondly, after you get the virtual agent started, then we start to think about agent assist. How can we empower those agents to be more knowledgeable and have higher kind of first-time fix rates, things of that nature. But frequently, we're seeing customers start with virtual agents and then move to agent assist and insights afterwards.
Got it. Okay, so I think as we move on to the next question, what has Google's approach been to building contact center AI solutions? We're going to bring in Celeste Grade here, who has been working with all of these partners to answer this question. Celeste?
Thank you, Sheila. And I'm very excited to be on this Fireside Chat because I have been working with these partners for years now, and so it's exciting to see where we have done and what we've done together. So our ultimate strategy as we looked at the space and a lot of what Matt talked about earlier as far as truly democratizing AI is how do we ensure that each one of these contact centers can take advantage of truly the best types of customer experience possible and make sure that it's not a science experiment and make sure that we're not doing POCs for the next 5 years. And we realize the best route here is really partnering with the telephony providers that all of these contact centers providers have and just adding in AI on top of their existing solutions. This does a lot of things that make sure that you're leveraging the solutions that you've had for years to come that has the overall contact center experience, right? And B, it makes sure that you can really have this great experience that's already integrated with these providers so you can start taking advantage of it, in 3 to 6 months versus 5 years after you hired all of your data scientists. So you see all of these providers as part of it. Most of them have already been pre-integrated. A bunch of them, after our GA announced, have also announced their GA, and we have various different system integration partners also to really help your organizations in whether it's building more conversational IVR, whether it's assisting a lot of the change management to really ensure the best experience for our contact center customers and providers.
So if I look at this list, Celeste, I see companies that are pure cloud plays, like a Nice inContact or, a Salesforce or a Twilio. And then I see others that have premises-based contact center solutions as well as cloud, right? People like Genesys or Cisco or Avaya. Is there any difference in how Google works with those customers? What's different, trying to apply Google Contact Center AI to a premises solution versus to a cloud solution? What's different from your perspective?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's one of the values of our partnerships and working with these partners for years now, in that they've worked on areas in which integration with contact center AI is essentially a hybrid to where making it easy to actually integrate with on-premise. So it doesn't matter if there's maybe an on-premise solution. It's so long as it fits in that software context, we figured out ways in which to integrate with contact center AI. So it doesn't matter if you're on-prem or cloud, it can still be very easy to enable.
Yeah, if I look at some of these vendors, several of them that have both premises and cloud solutions have created paths for their customers to begin to take advantage of cloud solutions while staying on premises. And one of the top things that people want to be able to add to existing systems is artificial intelligence. So it's great that Google has that approach that says, okay, if you're cloud, yeah, that's going to be easy. But if you're premises today, we will help be part of that bridge, letting you take advantage of artificial intelligence, which for the most part does come from the cloud, but on top of your premises solution. So thank you, Celeste. Good stuff.
Thank you.
So we're going to go back a little bit techie. We're going to get a little techie here with Matt. What is an API, an application programming interface, and how do you use one? And you might even start with, why is Sheila asking me this question?
So I would presume that you're asking me this question, Sheila, because at the end of the day, Contact Center API, or Contact Center AI rather, is a suite of APIs that we've built to fit this contact center use case. Now, when we talk about APIs, they are pretty much a way for different applications to communicate with one another. In the case of Contact Center AI, our partners have integrated with our APIs as a means of bringing our AI technology into their contact center platforms. So let's kind of walk through an example to talk about how these actually work. So let's take, for instance, a customer that uses the Contact Center AI virtual agent technology, and an end customer calls into a contact center. Now, the Contact Center as a service partner will send us that audio via an API call. Then, within the Google side, our application will first transcribe that audio to text using our speech-to-text technology, and then afterwards we'll send that transcription to Dialogflow's natural language understanding to determine what is the right response for this user. The next step is to take that response from Dialogflow that's in text form and actually convert it to an audio signal. So we take the text-to-speech and use that to create a voice response that we then finally send back to that Contact Center as a service partner using, once again, an API call. And then ultimately your Contact Center as a service partner plays back that audio to the end customer to complete that interaction. Now, while we use APIs to work with our partners, one of the benefits of these partnerships is that customers don't need to concern themselves with our APIs. Our goal for Contact Center AI at the end of the day is to make it as low to no code as possible. So while this concept of API is in the background enabling all of this, we don't want our customers to have to worry about it.
So I noticed on Celeste's slide that talked about the partners that you have, that it was not just Contact Center as a service companies, but also there was a customer relationship management company there, CRM. So are there times when Google is working with more than one other application, like a contact center as a service and a CRM, and does that get more complicated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are times when we are working with like a CRM provider, for instance, because there's relevant information stored in their system that can affect and then kind of improve this customer experience. So in those instances, there is another party that we are communicating with via APIs. However, once again, in the goal of making this kind of a low to no code solution, that's not something that the customer has to work with, has to worry about. We build those integrations with the partners, the CRM providers, to ensure that the kind of end-to-end solution we provide is very turnkey. And so that if you have information that's relevant to the call within the CRM system, that we can seamlessly pull that into the contact center application, and that your agent can have access to that information as they need, or even in the context of kind of that virtual agent automation experience, you can bring in the information as needed so that you can voice it to the customer.
Perfect, thank you. So if I think about what I've heard so far, I might think, well, am I going to need dedicated contact center developers in order to use Google Contact Center AI? I don't know if I have any. If I have any, I don't know if they know how to do this. So do I need dedicated developers, Matt?
Yeah, so our goal when we talk about making it a low to no code solution is to really ensure that customers don't need developers. So most of our Contact Center AI customers won't need developers to get the solution up and running. Our speech technology works completely out of the box, both on the speech-to-text and the text-to-speech side. And then when we think about the virtual agent side of things, our customers that are having the most success bringing virtual agents into their contact centers are investing in conversational designers rather than developers to design and create these conversational experiences. And many times those conversational designers are experienced and high-performing agents because those are the people that are most familiar with the array of questions that customers might have rather than developers, right? And then also for those customers that don't have the investment, don't have conversational designers on staff, we also work with other partners that can help out designing those conversational experiences. But then lastly, we think about the agent assist side. there's an integration there with knowledge bases to enable agents to get the recommendations and the suggestions from our technology, but we actually are also working on knowledge connectors so that that's also very plug and play. At the end of the day, we don't want development to be a hindrance to kind of unlocking this technology for your contact center and improving that customer service experience. So we don't see dedicated contact center developers as a need to make this work.
So question, how do I decide which intents that I want to work on? So I don't need a developer. I might be able to do that with a business analyst in the contact center. Does Insights help me with understanding what might be the right kind of intents to work on?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Insights, that's one of the key components of it, really. So we have a feature that we call topic modeling, where you can just give us a bunch of data, whether it's chat transcripts, actual audio logs, and from that, we can pull out what are the key things that customers are calling in about. So then you can say, okay, well, 20% of the time they're calling to let us know that they want to change the address for a shipment, or 10% of their time they're calling to figure out an account balance. And from that, you can then identify what is the best use cases to start with building out these conversational experiences. Our goal, and once again, this is kind of an out-of-the-box solution that when you work with your contact center providers, you can get this insights provided to you so that you can understand how should I start? Like, where should I spend my time with building out these experiences? What's going to give me the most bang for my buck in terms of kind of time given to building this out?
Good stuff. Good job handling these on-the-fly questions I'm thinking of as you're speaking.
Yeah. I like it. Keep it fun.
So Google Contact Center AI was first announced in the summer of 2018. And I think we've talked about the fact that it is now generally available, all of the components, as of a couple of weeks ago. So what else has been going on other than getting from announcement to general availability? What has been happening at Google Contact Center AI for the last 18 months? And what does GA really mean in Google parlance?
Yeah, so for the last year and a half, we've really been focusing on R&D. And so I really mean on both sides of that, both the research and the development. So from a research perspective, we realized that contact centers are a relatively new space for Google. And so we have a lot to learn. And so in the past year and a half, we've done a significant amount of research actually visiting contact centers, sitting with agents, sitting with QA analysts, sitting with contact center managers to better understand how do contact centers operate and how can we build contact center AI to be most helpful for these users. And now that we have a much better understanding of the various various stakeholders, from shift leads to QA analysts to agents themselves. And so at the end of the day, this is what allows us to make better decisions when it comes to development. Now, we've spent a lot of time developing new features and new functionality specific for the contact center over the past year and a half as well. So on the speech-to-text side, we've been developing some of the most advanced deep learning neural network algorithms. And now we support over 120 different languages. We have our speech-to-text vocabulary is 10x that of the Oxford Dictionary. And we're also working on specific telephony models that can handle the challenges of the telephony context when trying to do this transcription. We've had American English for a while. We just launched British English, American Spanish, and Russian, and we have many more to come. Now, the other side of speech is the text-to-speech. And so we want to ensure that in this contact center context, we are supporting a natural and conversational sounding voice. And so one of the areas we've been able to take advantage of here is Google's DeepMind technology that really provides us those nearly human sounding voices. And now we have over 90 different WaveNet voices, which is really the cutting edge in terms of natural sounding human-like voices, as well as over 20 different languages that we can support. Now, the other side we think about is for dialogue flow. And so that's what we were talking about before, which is that natural language understanding and the real kind of conversational core that powers natural and rich experiences. And so we now support over 30 different languages for dialogue flow, with more coming. we can support over 2,000 or up to 2,000 intents to really meet the needs of large enterprises and IVRs. And the proof is in the pudding there. We're seeing over 1 million developers now using Dialogflow for their natural language understanding technology. And then once again, we spoke a bit about Agent Assist before, but we've been doing the research to understand what the agent experience is like. And so now we've been testing some of these features that we're developing for agents with live agents to understand how can we improve that. And then lastly, within the context of Conversational AI, we've been working on these integrations with our partners. Now, we want to make the API integrations that we have with them much easier to use, identify ways to make this a better user experience, as well as ensuring that Conversational AI is a place where it can scale reliably. And you mentioned kind of what do we mean when we say GA? What does that mean within Google? And we recently went from beta to GA with Conversational AI, and the biggest difference there really is the ability to reliably scale and handle production workloads. I mentioned before that we have a significant amount of experience in the consumer side with the Google Assistant, Google Search, YouTube, kind of scaling kind of machine learning-based or artificial intelligence-based products. And so being able to do this product at Google scale is really where what we need to achieve to get to the level that we can call GA. And so a big part of that is the technical aspects, like ensuring that we can scale up our servers and handle tens of thousands of concurrent calls at one time. And then another part is a little more operational, right? Like ensuring that we actually have the support team and the processes in place to support enterprise customers and provide them the experience that they expect.
So that's interesting. I've done some work with companies as they develop their own applications. And one of the issues they have is, how do we scale this, right? We've done this proof of concept, and it's fine for the small number of calls or intents, but how do we make sure that we can take this into production? And it's nice to know that, even before you go general availability, Google has taken those steps for their customers. I want to take you back and ask you one question about something that you said there, Matt. You talked about one of the things that Google has been doing for the last 18 months is building telephony models. And you said, Russian and a couple of others for the speech understanding. But what does telephony models mean? Because you can understand the languages, but I think there's something more there that the audience might be interested in.
Yeah, so when we say telephony models, we're talking about that speech-to-text transcription model that's made specifically for the telephony context. The reality is when audio is coming through kind of the telephony routing and the telephony pipes, the quality is a little bit lower, and the technical aspects of it are different. You have lower frequencies. And so we need to ensure that we can handle the audio as it comes through a phone signal, and we can transcribe it correctly. And there's both that aspect of it, as well as the reality that in the telephony context, you can have a pretty long utterance, as opposed to if you're doing just the traditional kind of IVR context, those utterances are much shorter. So you could think of, for instance, if a customer calls in and they're talking to an agent, there might be a lot of small talk there, right? They might be talking about their day, they might be talking about whatever happens to be on their mind, as well as eventually getting to the issue that they called in about. And so there are some unique challenges in that context to ensure that you're transcribing it appropriately. And so our goal is to ensure that we are bringing a quality service no matter the channel, no matter the context. And so to do that, we're actually building out specific speech-to-text telephony models so that we can ensure that we are providing a quality transcription, as it kind of is the first step to doing some of the natural language understanding on the virtual agent side, as well as providing great suggestions to your agents for the Agent Assist side.
Excellent. I think that helps us all understand. The other thing I think about is, cell phones and that kind of thing, that you're purposely working on lower quality voice streams that you might be getting. Because I think, I was surprised to hear from one of your partners, actually, Avaya, that over 50% of telephone lines in homes today in the United States are mobile, right? So it's not an insignificant issue that contact center calls are coming in on mobile phones. So being able to handle that
Yep.
that quality of speech, that quality of recording, so that you can then do the rest of the work that Google Contact Center AI wants to be able to do well. Makes sense. So now, probably
Exactly.
the best slide in your deck. This is it. This is the money slide. You're going to tell us about 3 of the customers that have actually deployed Google Contact Center AI pre-general availability. And I think some of these even spoke at your event in London last week.
Yeah. So we actually had Marks and Spencer on stage presenting with us last week. And so one of the examples that I touched on briefly before is Marks and Spencer is a retailer in the UK, and they're now successfully routing over 6 million plus calls. And so one of the benefits there is they can have a high number of intents. They're using close to 2,000 intents that are being accurately routed to the right agent, as opposed to having a human sit at that part and just try to route all day, right? You could think of, if you're a customer service agent, it's much more appealing to work on interesting calls as opposed to just routing, taking the first call and trying to route it to another agent all day. Now, and from a kind of cost savings and kind of customer experience perspective, they're seeing an improvement of over 10 seconds in average handling time. All right, so the proof is really in the pudding there. Another example is Policy Bazaar, where they're seeing actual top-line growth, where they've been able to close sales, over 13,000 sales actually, and then over $2 million in annual monthly revenue. And so this is an interesting case where it's not so much a how do we make the business more efficient, but how do we actually improve our top line and provide better recommendations and a better experience to our customers that actually increases that kind of brand loyalty, which results in kind of, you can see it manifest rather, and how much they're spending with us. And then lastly, it's Woolworths, which is a Australian retailer that's doing something very similar to Marks and Spencer, where they are using a conversational IVR to provide an improved routing experience for their customers.
And so with Marks and Spencer and Woolworths, I know. What does Policy Bazaar do?
So Policy Bazaar is a company that helps you identify what's the right insurance policy effectively, right? And so you could think about, like, insurance can be a pretty complicated space. And so what they've been able to use the Contact Center AI technology to do is to provide better recommendations over the phone to their customers. And so they're providing a new channel to get recommendations, which can make a somewhat complicated space kind of easier to handle and kind of understand, because you can whittle it down to a couple of options that are good for the customer and then deliver those options to the customer in a conversational and kind of natural feeling context.
Excellent. So, it looks like there's business to consumer all happening here, but I'm sure there are probably some business to business applications as well. But maybe that we'll save those for the next webinar, because now we're going to get Eric involved again, and he's going to run a poll question for us.
Okay, thanks very much, Sheila. And here's our question. Do you see applications in your business for the kinds of projects that were deployed at Marks & Spencer, Policy Bazaar, and Woolworths? Options are yes, we've already deployed virtual agents. We're prototyping virtual agents. We don't use them today, but we're considering them, and no, we don't have any plans. And maybe maybe just real quickly, Matt, if you could just review as a reminder for people how you might characterize in a couple of words each of those 3 projects. Marks and Spencer was about sort of call handling efficiency. Is that fair?
Yep. So I would say Marks and Spencer and Woolworths were about call handling efficiency for a retailer. Policy Bazaar was actually about providing recommendations to customers in a conversational context.
And those, how did Policy Bazaar sort of validate the savings that they had?
So in Policy Bazaar's case, it wasn't savings; it was actually sales, and so they could see that what sales are actually coming from a conversation that's involving this conversational experience, and so they could directly say that X% of sales were a function of the conversational experience.
Got it. Okay, well, here's all our results. With that, I'll just hand it back over to Sheila if you want to talk with Matt and Celeste about the results or just move on. But thanks, everyone, for helping.
So not surprised to see that over 50% of you haven't yet deployed virtual agents, but are considering it. And good on you. You're here learning what Google Contact Center AI can possibly do to be part of that future. 22% saying they have no immediate plans. And that's okay, too, because we did ask the question about, virtual agents there. And some companies are saying, you know what, I like the thought of using Google Contact Center AI to assist my agents, the way Marks and Spencer did by allowing call disposition. It helps the agents save 10 seconds on average on a call. But we're not really ready to do agents. And almost 10% say they have already deployed virtual agents, which, a year ago, number one, I don't think the number would have been as high. And number two, I'm not surprised at that. I mean, just today I was doing something about something I ordered, and I got a virtual assistant from a company. And then I went to the shipping company, and darn, I got another virtual assistant in chat. So it's definitely happening. Do you have any comments, Matt, on the prototyping and trialing? We've got 16% of people saying that. Can you tell us a little bit about how people transition from that to deploying?
Yeah. So as we mentioned before, a little bit at least, but we see topic modeling as an opportunity to identify what are some of the key use cases you can use. And then once you start to prototype and trial, you get a little bit more experience with how do I build out these conversational experiences, right? You start to develop a bit of that conversational designer competency within your contact center. And so what we recommend is once you've kind of got past this prototyping phase, you can start to, once you have confidence in maybe one key intent, or a couple of key intents, you can deploy it in the contact center, and then using topic modeling to understand what are the other key things that your customers are calling about, you can start to kind of add on additional intents there, as well as understanding, are there certain phrases that are getting confused, that the virtual agent is getting confused about, and improve kind of the accuracy of your virtual agent at the same time. So I like to think that you start with a prototype. Once you have confidence in the prototype, you expand the amount of traffic it's getting, and then you can start to add in additional intents while you're using topic modeling to understand what are the topics that people are calling about.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. I remember once this notion that you don't have to guess for those first couple of applications of artificial intelligence. All you have to do is ask agents and supervisors. They will tell you what the most oft asked questions are. What are the things that we end up spending time on that could easily be done by a virtual assistant. But then when you want to get more sophisticated and it's the tools like insights that are going to help you take it further. Good stuff. Okay, so we've talked about what you've been doing for the last 18 months, Matt. You and I guess there's another couple of guys that are working on this? No. What are the plans that Google has as you look out over the next year or two for Contact Center AI?
Yeah, so we're planning on expanding across all of those different areas that I've touched on today. So one of our immediate key focuses is expanding the languages that we can serve with our telephony speech models. And so this is one of the key components to enabling Contact Center AI for our customers globally. Currently, we support American and UK English, American Spanish, and Russian, and our plan is to rapidly build out additional support for other languages in the next year or two. Now, thinking on the virtual agent side, we're focused on enabling enterprises to handle the scale and complexity of a contact center. Dialogflow already supports 5 times the scale of our nearest competitor in terms of the number of intents and is being used in highly complex use cases. Now, we want to double down on that strength and accelerate enterprise adoption. And so this predominantly will mean features that better serve the enterprise. You can think of things such as better tools to build bots, tools to understand where bots get confused, and the ability to handle more intents, which is some of the things that we are thinking about and working on currently. Now, on the agent assist side, we're just getting started. So there will be a ton to learn in the next year. Our goal in general is to help agents be more effective and efficient by reducing some of the more mundane tasks they do and allow them to focus on providing the human touch in customer service. We're currently working on a number of feature improvements to our knowledge article and FAQ suggestions to make them more relevant, workflow suggestions and easier fulfillment to help agents more easily and quickly solve issues for customers. We're looking at improved chat tools like Smart Reply for suggested responses and Smart Compose for auto-completion. And we have a number of other features that are a little bit earlier in the R&D phase, which will crystallize as we start to learn more. Right? I think this is one of the areas where we have a lot to learn as we have more adoption and to understand what's really moving the needle for our customers. And then lastly, we'll also go deeper into insights for contact center AI. Topic modeling was kind of our first product within this space, which enables the automation of understanding what topics are being discussed in the call. But we also are working on more advanced call analysis tools to help contact center managers, QA analysts identify what are specific areas of interest within these calls, how can we help them perform more efficient that quality assurance process, as well as quickly identify opportunities to actually coach your agents, identify what are things that the agents are struggling with, and you can help them out proactively.
Excellent. Looks like you've got a busy couple of years ahead of you, and that we'll be seeing the benefits of that as we go on. So I am going to turn it back to Eric, who's going to handle the Q&A.
All right, sounds great. Thanks very much, Sheila, and also, of course, thanks, Matt and Celeste. It was terrific, really interesting conversation. For Q&A, just reminding everyone, you've got the text box at the right hand of the presentation window where you can type in your question or click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And let's start with a question on, here's one. Let's just kind of maybe start with the Google team and then maybe get any perspective you have, Sheila. How will the verification and identification process work with virtual AI agents?
Thanks, Eric. So for virtual agents, when kind of the AI agents, we have this feature called fulfillment, which allows us to connect with your backend systems and process any type of virtual or verification or authorization process that you might need. Another thing that we're actually starting to work with voice biometric firms as well to start to provide another capacity for that verification or authorization process. But we have a number of customers that are using it today, and we're seeing that this is very helpful because, for instance, if it needs to get to the human agent, it's ideal if the customer has already been authorized or verified and you know who they are. So we've kind of developed this with that use case in mind so we can easily support it.
Any other, Sheila, any thoughts on?
I was just going to say that, since I didn't open my bid mouth, I really don't have anything to add on that one.
Okay. Well, then let's move on to something that I think is the kind of thing that's on a lot of people's minds, and it is for the Google team. What does Google do with my data?
That's a great question. So your data is your data with Google and no one else's. So we are very, very serious about how we handle your data. No other customers will have access to your data. Data isn't shared for training models. At the end of the day, it's imperative from our perspective that any data you provide to us is only used for models within your company and for your customers. As well as if you send us any data, we also do what we call DLP, which just removes any forms of personally identifiable information. So we ensure that we are not storing anything that might be of concern to you, and as well as anything that you store with us will only be accessible to you and no other customers.
So I think what you talked about there, that DLP process, is what some of us may know as anonymizing the data. So what's the difference? I'm going to sort of follow-up question here, Matt. What's the difference between securing our data, if I'm one of your enterprise customers, and using the data to make better models? So if if I'm your customer, McGee-Smith Analytics is your customer, you're securing my data, you're anonymizing it, but do you use it to create models that might be used by other people, other companies?
Yeah, great question. Great question, Sheila. So we both secure the data, so anonymize it, as you said, but we also ensure that we do not use your data for anyone else's models. So any models that you train or you build using your data will only be used for your use case and for your company. It's one of the key components as we see it is that we don't want there to be any data sharing amongst customers. Data is a very valuable asset to your company, and it should only be used for your benefit. And so we ensure that there's no data leakage, no data sharing. If you give us data for your use case, it will only be used for your use case. It will not be used for any other customer's models.
Excellent. Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. And let's go to another question. Sheila asked earlier about whether an enterprise would need to hire developers, and Matt, you indicated that you really don't. But AI itself is kind of a whole new sort of field of expertise and discipline, and is the idea here that I can just essentially outsource everything dealing with AI to Google, and my enterprise folks can worry about what they've always done, or do I need to hire people who know something about AI, and who are those people if they even exist?
So I'm going to start with this one because I too have been working with companies that are thinking about these issues, right? And I think the good news is that the graduates coming out of business schools, engineering schools, are taking these kinds of classes. They're beginning to understand and coming out with skills that might not be in your contact center today, but will be useful not because you need them to build the AI, but you need them to understand how it will work in your business, right? Google is doing really good work to understand the contact center market, working with all the contact center vendors, but there's still vertical aspects of artificial intelligence, meaning, the various industries. And so I think you do want to think about hiring people who may have coursework or former experience in the area of artificial intelligence without necessarily needing them to, be coding all day long. So that's sort of Sheila's point of view. I'm curious what yours is, Matt.
Yeah, I would agree and kind of double down on what you said there, Sheila. I think one of the goals that we had in mind is you don't need AI developers, right? You don't need machine learning engineers to make this work, but you should have folks who understand how AI works at a high level, right? That they understand that the quality of the model is dependent on the data that you provide, that there's going to be a training process sometimes to ensure that you can create a new model. But these are more high-level AI concepts that can be applied broadly, as well as your employees would have a deep understanding of your key use case. So it's really not AI technical knowledge that I would say you want to hire, but just kind of more of the AI general knowledge and then the deep domain knowledge of your business so they can understand where that intersection is and how to build kind of the contact center experience appropriately.
Okay, great. And we've got time for one more question. I mean, we got a ton of questions here, which is awesome. And we're not going to get to them all, but we'll have all these questions collected, and we'll have them in the report that our system will generate for us. So the folks you've heard from today will be able to get back to you one-on-one with the information on your contact that you gave us when you registered, and they'll be able to help you with answers after the event. So let me close with this last question, and it's a small question. If I was going to start an AI project, how would I begin?
So I'm going to start with this, and then obviously Matt will join in, hopefully. I think if you go back to one of our earlier slides and you looked at all of the vendors that Google Contact Center AI has worked with, contact center vendors, you will probably see your contact center solution vendor there. That means that they've already been working for 12 to 18 months with Google, and they're down a learning curve. And so you can start with the people that you work with every day in terms of how do I integrate that to what I already have today. So I think that's the best place to start is right with your existing contact center vendor. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree. The goal here is to not introduce too much additional complexity, right? So your contact center software provider has been working with us. They have an understanding of specifically how can you use their software, kind of their contact center application within the context of contact center AI. So they will be the subject matter expert to get you kind of off the ground day one. And then using the other components that we talked about, right? So using topic modeling to understand what are some of the key use cases that we can use, as well as Sheila mentioned, you have a number of subject matter experts in your contact center, whether that's your agents, your contact center managers, and then you can identify what are some good use cases to start with and work with your contact center provider to actually kind of get that off the ground and running.
All right, terrific. I think that's a great note to end on. As you can see, I've pushed out a slide with some resources, a bunch of blog posts and some other information that Google's provided for us. So please do take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about this topic. It's a really rich topic, and as you can see, it's one that's going to be just increasingly more important over time. We'll be covering it extensively at Enterprise Connect, and you'll be reading about it everywhere, including No Jitter. Sheila covers it extensively, and Google obviously is a huge piece of this. So I want to thank Google for sponsoring, as well as thank everybody in the audience for listening in today. We really appreciate your attention and your participation. Now, within the next 24 hours, you're going to get a personalized follow-up email from us with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. And since we had such a great response, I'm sure there's more people out there who would love to hear this session and listen to the replay. So please do forward that along to any of your colleagues that you think might also get something out of listening to this. The webinar is copyright by Informa. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Enterprise Connect and Google, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our speakers, Sheila, Matt, and Celeste, I'm Eric Kraft. Thanks for your time and have a great day.